If you're looking at buying a home but you can't decide whether you should buy now or wait till next year because home prices have started to come down, then this video is for you. Home prices are falling at the fastest rate, with prices going down each month. But with mortgage rates at record highs at the moment, getting on the property ladder is still far out to reach even with the price drops. And with experts predicting a dip in rates in 2024, it's starting to get many of us thinking, shall I buy now or wait to land a more affordable deal in the future? So if you're sitting on the sidelines and confused, I'm going to break down everything you need to know so you can decide for yourself whether you should buy now or next year. So ever since I can remember, property prices have seemed only to go one way, and that's up. It's like every year we reach record highs. I mean, this article was in 2020, this one was at the end of 2021, and again this one was in 2023. So as a result of the past few decades, the cost of homes has outpaced the average rising earnings. If you look at the data from March 2021, the average cost of a home was 65 times more than the average home in January 1970, while wages are only like 35.8 times higher now. So it's like the gap's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. But the most recent data now shows that the demand is reducing and house price growth is slowing down, which is mainly down to the higher cost of getting a mortgage plus the higher cost of living. In fact, the average discount buyers are getting has increased to 4.2% now. So you can get around £12,000 knocked off the asking price. That wasn't possible a few years ago when people were offering crazy amounts and houses were even going well over the asking price. So if you're wondering if it's the right time to buy, making the move now could mean you can negotiate a price reduction. And for those who believe that prices are set to drop even further next year, so they'd rather wait, you could be right. The Center for Economics and Business Research themselves, they think that prices could fall between anything between 8 to 10% over the next year. And if that's true, falling house prices mean the cost of a typical home will drop from 5 times the average household disposable income to 4.2 times in 2024. To put that into context, that would give the lowest ratio since 2015, which means that buying a house next year would probably be better. And there are some people, I'm sure there are, who are waiting for a property crash. So not just like an 8 to 10% drop like we've talked about, but more like the 2008 crash, where the average house price in the UK fell by 18.2%. If you listen to the OBR, which is short for Office for Budget Responsibility, who basically advises the government on the health of the economy, they predict that house prices will drop by 10% over the next 2 years. 10% isn't exactly a crash, and that's like half of what happened in 2008. All that 10% drop would mean is that it would put prices back to autumn 2021 levels, so you have to take that into consideration. One thing I wanted to add is that though average house prices have generally fallen this year, they're still almost around 15% higher than they were before the pandemic a few years ago, and no one really knows what's going to happen, whether a crash is coming or whether it's a soft landing. But I think it would be very unfair to expect 2008 results simply because things were different then. Before 2008, it was pretty common for lenders to offer mortgages without a deposit required. Some were even offering more than the value of the property. Banks like Nationwide, for example, were giving out 125% loans back then. If you look at banks now, they've kind of learned the lesson and usually don't really lend more than 85%, unless you're Skipton Bank, of course. On top of that, there's already a housing shortage in the UK, with the government falling well below the target of 300,000 houses a year. The last time the UK actually met that target was back in 1978. So what a shortage usually means is that if there's more demand for a house compared to its supply, naturally prices usually go up instead of down. And like I said, no one really knows what's going to happen for sure, but based on data and trends, you can sort of come up with an educated guess, and that's what we're trying to do here, where we present the facts and then it's up to you to decide what you need to do. If you ask me personally, and if you're waiting for prices to come down, I just think timing the market is almost impossible. We investors tend to focus more on short-term fluctuations because you want the best deal possible. I get that. But if you're a regular home buyer who plans to live in your home for, let's say, more than 5 years, you should be less concerned about timing the market and wait for prices to come down. Yes, you might overpay a little bit in the short term, but if you're in your home for long enough, don't think it'll make much of a difference. And it's simply because we all know, and this chart shows, that over the long term, house prices tend to go up. Also, weigh up the cost of waiting as well, especially if you're renting, because rents are already hitting record highs. I read somewhere that the monthly rent on an average British home was £1,085. That's a lot. So if you're renting for 2 years while waiting for an 8% house price fall, you'd save around £23,000 on the purchase price of an average home. But at the same time, you would have spent like £26,000 on rent. So you need to weigh that up as well. Now here's the thing. If price was the only factor in deciding whether you should buy a house or not, then think about it. All those people during 2020 and 21, when prices were going up and up and up, they wouldn't have bought. But the reason why they continued to buy despite record high prices was because at the time interest rates were at record lows, which meant cheaper mortgages. So when it comes to buying a house, you don't want to just look at the price. You also want to be looking at the mortgage rates you'll be paying, because the true price is what you buy it for and the cost of the loan together. Because there's no point in saying, oh, you can afford the deposit of the property, but then you can't pay the monthly payments. When it comes to mortgage rates, there's two things that really depend on whether mortgage rates will increase or decrease. The first one is the Bank of England's base rate, and the other is the inflation rate in the UK. In the shortest explanation, if the inflation rate is high, usually the Bank of England increases the base rate to bring inflation down, which means higher mortgage rates. And then when inflation starts going down, usually the Bank of England will lower the base rate and then cheaper mortgage rates follow, usually. If you look at the recent data, right, we can see that inflation has slowly started to come down already, where we had double-digit inflation in June and July, and now it's something like 6.7%. I mean, it's still much higher compared to the target 2% inflation, but at least we're making progress, and it seems that inflation has started to cool down, which is why most people are expecting that mortgage rates are likely to fall in the future. So if that's true, what we know is that eventually lower mortgage rates could and should follow. I don't personally think we can expect them to bottom out to record lows either. Returning to super low rates of 2 to 3%, those days are long gone, because those rates were unique, and it's simply because we had a pandemic. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that we have to get used to higher interest rates in general. They may not be as high as 6, 7 or 8% in some cases, but historically the average mortgage interest rate from 1995 to 2022, right, so that's a lot of data, was 5.62%. And let's imagine that they do drop to pre-pandemic levels, then you could always end up refinancing at that rate anyways. And without putting it down on that, remember that if you're waiting for mortgage rates to come down, I understand that. Who doesn't want low repayments? But you're not the only one who's waiting for the same thing. And when mortgage rates do start lowering, then things obviously become more affordable for everyone, not just you. So what does that mean? It means that there's more competition for the same property, and we already know that more competition pushes the price of the property up again, which kind of brings you back to the same position as you were before. But let's say that you're not too fussed about the competition when mortgage rates do go down, because you've got enough of a deposit, and even a 10% increase in prices, for example, isn't too much of a problem. But what you're looking for is the lowest monthly payments, and you're happy to wait. So at the time of recording this video, mortgage payments on a typical home are 58.9% of an average salary. That's according to the research company Capital Economics. In their forecast, it'll take until 2025 for that drop down to 41.7%, and that forecast is dependent on house prices falling by 12% over the next 2 years. If neither fall as much as expected, home prices and mortgages could be more unaffordable for longer. So I guess it's down for you to see whether, one, you think that the forecast could be right, and then number two is whether you're willing to wait until 2025. So these are all the things that you have to consider before buying your home. And I know it's tricky because honestly speaking, there's no clear-cut answer of whether you should wait or buy now. It's like for every reason to wait, there's as much of a reason not to wait. Which one worries you more? Is it the prices or is it the mortgage? That's a good sign as to what you should be doing. Don't let scary headlines put you off. Do the maths, weigh up the pros and cons based on your situation, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button. Good luck.